What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to continue our coverage over Thunderbolts, and we're going to pick up with another one-shot. Like I said in our last video, the first couple stories we covered over Norman Osborn's Thunderbolts was written by Warren Ellis. But after Cage Angels, the second storyline, he basically left that storyline and a new writer came in. But that new writer wrote a bunch of one-shot books that actually leads into his run on Thunderbolts, which of course actually picks up right in the middle of Secret Invasion. Now, with that being said, we covered Breaking Point, his first one-shot storyline he covered, which was all about Songbird. This next one is called International Incident, which of course is about the Radioactive Man. Because you have to remember, when it comes to the Radioactive Man, yes, he was a bad guy in the early days of Marvel Comics, but at this point, he was no longer bad. He was kind of like the borderline hero slash villain. Now, the reason why he's on the Thunderbolts is because, one, he was on the last team, and two, because China gave him over as a way to kind of like make a deal with America in some way. And so he's basically only on the team because the Chinese government gave him over to the US to be used by the US. But of course, Chinese government can pull him away anytime they want to. But of course, this book is all about him, and also is something else we have to cover because, again, when we actually jump into Nicolas Cage writing of Thunderbolts and Secret Invasion, a lot of things in the one-shots actually reappear again in the actual storylines down the road. With that being said, here is Thunderbolts International Incident. And so getting into today's video, we actually do pick up with the Thunderbolts right now, going after a particular group of Chinese superhuman characters who are trying to get away from the Thunderbolts. Now, the reason why I mentioned their race is actually going to be somewhat important for the beginning of this book, but also the ending of this book. Not ending, really the middle. But either way, though, you do have the Thunderbolts right now trying to capture these characters. Now, you have to remember, when it comes to this version of the Thunderbolts, they work for the American government. And what I mean is that after Civil War, a new law was made, basically saying that if you're going to be a superhuman in America, you have to basically register under the new law. Now, of course, if you do not follow that law, you're basically breaking it, which means that you will get arrested and locked up. Now, with that being said, though, these characters are not following that law, and so, of course, the Thunderbolts are here to capture them, because when the American government made that new law, they also made a new version of the Thunderbolts, this team right here. And Norman Osborn is the one in charge of this team. Now, the reason why Norman Osborn is in charge because he proved that he's no longer the Green Goblin. Of course, he has to take medicine as a way to control the Green Goblin persona, but of course, he's shown them that he's technically somewhat good. And so that is why he's in charge of the Thunderbolts. But either way, though, you do have the team right now fighting against these Chinese characters. Now, in the middle of the fight, you do have some of these Chinese characters actually get very upset with the Radioactive Man because he's also Chinese. And of course, his name is kind of based off a god in the Chinese culture. Now, of course, these characters believe that when it comes to the Radioactive Man, he's basically a traitor. But of course, he's kind of like, no, I'm not. I'm just here to protect innocent people from you guys. Now, that is the moment you have one of these Chinese characters just flat out die. Like their body begins to fall apart and they die. And that right there is huge because now it's kind of like, wait, why in the world did that one person die? His body just melted and he's gone. And of course, the rest of the group is kind of wondering the same thing too, because they're wondering if they're also going to die as well. And so you have the Thunderbolts actually take these Chinese superhuman characters back to their actual base. Now, that is the moment we see that the Thunderbolts had taken the Chinese characters back to Thunderbolts Mountain, the base of the Thunderbolts. Now, the reason why I've been saying these Chinese characters is because their race is very important. And the reason why, because after interviewing all of these different characters, they come to tell us that they got their powers from a particular person, and that person is Armin Zola. So Armin Zola is an old character. I want to say Jack Kirby actually made him. But either way, though, he was a scientist who was a scientist back in World War II. Now, of course, after the ending of the war, he was able to transfer his mind into a robotic body so that he'll be able to continue his experiments, which of course he began to do in China, where these Chinese characters actually met Armin Zola because he gave them their powers. But of course, there is a side effect. You could possibly die. Now, with that being said, you actually do have Armin Zola in China right now continuing his experiments. Now, the Chinese government had told America that they'll be the ones to handle Armin Zola. But of course, US doesn't want to trust China with them actually dealing with Armin Zola. They want to be the ones to capture him because they're afraid that Armin Zola's technology could possibly fall in the hands of China. And that would be a bad thing for the US government. And so the US had asked the Thunderbolts to sneak into China to get Armin Zola and bring him back over to the US. Now, the Radioactive Man is pissed off. And the reason why, because he feels like the US are breaking a huge peace treaty, especially with him being on the team. Because remember, the Chinese government gave over the Radioactive Man to the US. Now, for the Radioactive Man, he believes the Chinese only did that as a way to kind of show a peace treaty being done between the two countries. But of course, you have Norman Osborn say, the only reason why you're on this team right now is because your government doesn't want you there in your country right now. They want you over here because they're scared of your powers. They feel like you cannot control your powers. And so, of course, that is why you're here. It's not because they gave you over as a way to build peace between the two countries. No, it's because they're afraid of your powers. Now, when it comes to the Radioactive Man, he doesn't believe that, and so he leaves to figure out if that actually is true. Now, of course, you do actually have the Radioactive Man go over to see one of his close friends and allies, which is called the Collective Man. Now, the Collective Man is honestly not that important at all. And matter of fact, usually in Marvel Comics, he never really was. And so I'm not going to sit down and really explain who he is, except the fact that he's also from China, and right now he is stationed at the Chinese embassy. Now, with that being said, though, the reason why the Radioactive Man actually went to go see the Collective Man is because it's the Radioactive Man wants to know and make sure that basically what Norman Osborn said earlier is true. Like, was Norman Osborn serious about the idea that China doesn't want the Radioactive Man back in their country because of his powers? And so, of course, you do have the Collective Man actually tell the Radioactive Man, yes, that is true. China does not want you back because of your powers, because you did go out of control once before. Now, yes, the doctors were able to help you get control of your powers. But the thing is, though, it could still happen again down the road. And that is why China does not want you back in their country, because they're afraid of the possibility that you actually might lose control of your powers. And so you do have the Radioactive Man kind of upset that his country, the one he truly cared for and always wanted to fight for, is basically just throwing him to the side because his powers could go out of control and it could possibly kill a lot of people down the road. Now, you do have the team actually go over to Germany first because there was a base owned by Armin Zola in Germany. And so, of course, they do get there. But, of course, Zola is not there. He's long gone in the wind. And so, of course, it's basically a dead end. Now, of course, you do have Swordsman finding a device that does tell Zola that someone has broken into his base. And so the base is set to explode. And luckily, our characters are able to get out of there. Now, With that being said, though, as soon as they leave the building, of course, they have to remember they have to leave quickly because they were not allowed in Germany at all. Because again, this is a U.S. government team. And so, of course, they have to get rights or I almost said permission to actually fly into those other countries' airspace. And so, of course, they have to leave Germany very quickly. Now, of course, when they do arrive in China, the first mission is to basically get inside the base of Armin Zola. Now, the problem is, though, as soon as the team arrives at the China base of Armin Zola, they are confronted by some very strange creatures. Now, these creatures are not really old or new Marvel characters. Like, matter of fact, we're not going to see these characters ever again. They're just some gooey monsters who do attack the Thunderbolts. Now, of course, you do have each member thinking who is going to escape to get inside the base of Armin Zola to basically stop him. But of course, no one is really able to escape except Swordsman. Now, the only reason why he does escape really is because he actually knows the floor plan of Armin Zola bases, because Armin Zola used to work for Swordsman's father back in the day. And so it makes sense for Swordsman to go in there because he knows how Armin Zola lairs are usually laid out. And so he does go inside the base to kind of find Armin Zola. Now, we do see the Radioactive Man also thinking about going inside as well. Now, this is where the story kind of wraps up very quickly. And what I mean by that is you basically have the book, and this is what I hate about these one-shots. We're actually at the very end of the book. Just like right here, right now, the book wraps up very quickly. And what I mean is that you do have Swordsman go inside the base of Armin Zola, but the real reason why Armin Zola is kind of being chased after Swordsman is because Swordsman knows that Armin Zola can basically make a clone for for Swordsman. And what I mean is that when it comes to Swordsman, you have to remember his name is Andreas Strucker. And originally, before he became a swordsman, he was actually part of a group called the Strucker Twins. Him and his sister, Andrea Strucker. Now, his sister has been dead for a good period of time. And so the reason why he came over to Armin Zola is to ask Armin Zola to make him a clone of his sister so that he'll be with his sister finally again. Now, of course, you have Armin Zola agree to this because that means Swordsman is going to let Armin Zola leave to actually complete this deal. Now, you do have the Radioactive Man walk in and actually stop Armin Zola before leaving. Now, here's the thing, though. To Radioactive Man, he thinks that Swordsman is actually betraying the team. But that is the moment you have Swordsman say, there's no betraying on his team because there's no trust on his team. We do not like each other. We cannot trust Norman Osborn. And you should see that now, Radioactive Man. He lied to you. He told you the country, your country, gave you to us as a gift, but in reality, your country did not want you anymore. Norman Osborn knew that, and he held that from you. On top of that, he's playing mind games with all of us on his team. So no, nobody can trust them. We can't trust each other. But I do know one thing. You have to let Armin Zola go. Because if you don't, this place is going to blow up. And when it does blow up, the pieces of this building is going to hit the village at the bottom of the mountain. And people are going to die. So what are you going to do? Are you going to let Armin Zola leave so that this place does not blow up? Or be a hero, I guess, take him in, watch his place blow up, and possibly have innocent people die. Now remember, the team right now, they're in China. And so these are people of the Radioactive Man. And he's kind of like, you're right. It makes sense for me to go ahead and let Armin Zola go to protect my people. But on top of that, to help out Swordsman as well. And so Armin Zola actually leaves. Now, this plot line will continue in the actual run by Nicholas Gage, the writer of this one shot. when we actually dive into the Secret Invasion tie-in for the Thunderbolts. But either way, though, the story ends on that, because when the rest of the team actually arrives to kind of, get Armin Zola, they come to find out he got away. And the question is right now is, Swordsman, why did you let him leave? Radioactive Man, why did you let him leave? And they don't say anything at all. And so with that being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.